There's a few things I'd like to say, but I wouldn't preempt the poems, and I wouldn't second guess the things that are going to be said about this book, which I've lived with for a number of months now, and have not exactly insight into it, but have the unusual kind of intimacy of having returned to it on a number of occasions, because I think that's what makes poetry in the end. It's not the flash in the pan or out of the pan. It's the sense that when you come back to it, that it adds and that it gives more, and sometimes it gives different, and sometimes it steers you in one direction and afterwards in another. But one particular aspect of this book, I think, kind of demanded me or someone to say something tonight. I think Paula is lucky in lots of ways that I think this book will be thoroughly and seriously, horrible thing to say, reviewed and considered, but it will be greeted, I think, exceptionally warmly, not least because, in a way, Paula has held her fire until the astonishing 3 years of the Ireland Chair of Poetry ended. It would have been a real temptation to rush something out during that period when it seemed that the poetry audience and the wider arts audience couldn't get enough of her. But again, it's kind of testament to her sometimes self-effacing tendency that she held her wished, which is not something you'd say about her on many occasions. But the thing I wanted to say here about the book has to do with the title and the arrangement of the book. This is kind of maybe a stereotypical male approach to it, but I think that's no harm. It seems to me, in some ways, that this book and a book like this, and maybe particularly poetry books from women, I'm going to spread it out as far as that, often get reviewed for what they say, and very seldom for how they say it, particularly by male reviewers. I don't know why that is, but it is something that one can't help but notice over the years. So Geomantic is a book of 81 poems. You can see that when you open it. Each made up of 9 lines, and each of those 9 lines is made up of 9 syllables. Paula is far from the first poet to show an interest in syllabics, as it's called, even in recent times and in this general parish, but the experiment at first sight seems relatively new to her, and has resulted in poems that are, for one thing, shorter, more imagistic, and maybe less driven by narrative than much of her previous work. And that's work that I'm sure lots of people in this room will be very familiar with. Her familiar concerns and motifs make their way through, but it's as if the poet has put an obstacle in her own way here, in order to test the power and almost certainly the authority of what's on her mind. Like most poets, Paula Meehan has been interested long time in pattern. As it happens, one of her best-known earlier poems is in fact called The Pattern. And it explores, among other things, the subjects of inheritance, tradition, the difficult mother-daughter relationship. Pattern is both an expectation and a demand, but it's also something that's independent, something with a power in itself. Grief and loss, memory and memorial are among the many subjects of Geomantic. And one might say that the regular grid work of these 9-syllable lines is used as a way to keep ideas and maybe emotions at times in check. The truth is, of course, that a poem worthy of the name is made out of the interplay of form and content. And who's to say where one ends and the other begins? We may start off, as in Geomantic, by noticing a formal pattern, the striking facade or scaffolding of the work, as it were. But the job of the poet is to move us on through the experience of an entire construction, room by room or stanza by stanza. Paula's long interest in the tarot, in the I Ching with its ground-up accumulation of 6-line hexagrams, 6 twitches or glitches or stitches in time, and her interest in quilt making, of which there are strong echoes in the cover paintings by Paula herself, if you haven't noticed. All these attest to the notion that pattern is a powerful ally when it comes to dealing with change, with aging, with mystery, with loss, and a great deal of this book is about those four interwoven threads. If the poems in previous books enjoyed more room to develop and riff on ideas, a great deal of the power of these new verses derives from the sense that, like tarot cards or I Ching hexagrams, they too have turned up in the moment and find much of their meaning only when experienced in sequence. When I first read Geomantic, I observed to Paula one night that I saw a direct link to a much earlier small poem, Would You Jump Into My Grave As Quick? That's an 8-liner that has the same fragmentary quality and suggestive power. Whatever the connection, whether it was intentional or not, I think maybe Paula was relieved that I was seeing a link. You can never be entirely sure with publishers, maybe, especially poetry publishers who are likely to be in it only for the money. What's more, although that line isn't as good tonight, that works really well if there's 2 people at the reading. But what's more interesting, maybe, is that rereading that earlier poem, The Pattern, yesterday, I was struck by something I hadn't noticed before, or at least hadn't noticed that I'd noticed. So the opening section has its roots in that familiar thing called the iambic pentameter, that 5-beat line we all remember, at least from school. If one considers it from the syllabic point of view, in fact it too opens with a sequence of 9-syllable lines. And in fact, it could have come straight out of Geomantic, a work that appeared nearly 20 years later. In fact, of the 5 lines that make up the opening sentence, 4 of them have the distinctive 9 syllables, and only one has 10. Little has come down to me of her, a sewing machine, a wedding band, a clutch of photos, the sting of her hand across my face in one of our wars when we had grown bitter and apart. What this tells us, apart from the fact that I'm a nerd who should get out a bit more often, is that the imposed limitations that you're going to encounter in Geomantic are not arch or calculated or arbitrary or show-offy, but they're highlighting of something fundamental to the way language works and to the ways it can be made memorable by a poet writing at the absolute height of her powers. Geomantic may reveal its formal concerns on its sleeve or on its cover at least. But as someone who's lived with it now for a number of months, I'm pleased to say, in fact I'm proud to say, that it is the undersong, the deep music, the mourning and missing and empathetic music, and in the flow of things, the celebration of flow itself, that makes it considerably more than the sum of its parts. It's not often that there's a turnout like this for a book of poetry. In some ways that's a shame, in other ways it's just the way the world is. But it's a real pleasure to be here tonight, not as the publisher, and I'm delighted to be the publisher, and Raphael, my other half, is holding the fort. But to be here as a reader, it's an exceptional book. If I wasn't the publisher, I'd still be recommending to you that you do what you've already started to do, which is buy it in droves. Paula Meehan.
I have to get a special box put up here because I was invisible behind the podium, which is probably a safe place to be. So, what can I say? I can't, I have to get my act together and not stand here weeping, but thank you for coming and coming in such numbers. There's people from all parts of my class here. And it's all better to get on tonight now. Yeah. So I live across the green from my publisher, one of my many publishers. And so far, anyway, we haven't fallen out. And Rafaela and Pat are great friends, neighbours, brilliant neighbours, and there's lots of neighbours here from Montclair too. So thanks for coming along. They're great neighbours, they're great sports, and that's where we keep the spare key to the house. So the fact that they published the work is really a bonus in a long and valued friendship. Theo Dorgan, who's here tonight, so far, that's why everyone from my past has to be on the best behaviour, especially towards Theo, who's from Cork. And without him, I really would not have these poems. I wouldn't have the quality of life, as they say, that I have, and the companionship, especially in the rough times. So there's loads of friends from different places. Is the sound very wonky?
No, sorry.
Okay. So this was a kind of demented way of getting through the years of the professorship. And I had the little template, no matter how crazy things got or how I felt like I wasn't standing up enough for poetry. I could just return with my template to the imaginative space and make the poems. The book is dedicated to Kieran Carson and Deirdre Shan, who've been strong friends of mine for, again, going way back to, I think, the early 90s. And Kieran Carson, when I'm reading up in Belfast, he sits up towards the front of the audience and he makes signs at me, the most polite of which are, one more, and don't be rabbiting on, let the poems do their work. So I'm not going to give him a hard time and put him through loads of encomiums about how good a friend himself and Deirdre are to me. And Deirdre, who's there, she's a great fiddler, and all my life she's been connecting me to those tunes and reminding me of where we come from. So I love them dearly. The book is prefaced by a couple of lines of his from one of his small poems. Indefatigable, dazzling, terrestrial strangeness. So this is some of the poems from Geomantic. Pat mentioned a poem called Would You Jump Into My Grave As Quick? And I'll say that for you because some of the local young ones in Montclair came up to me. We weren't long living there, and they came up and they said, is that your poem on the leaving cert? Yeah, it is. Oh, we love it. Oh, yeah, really. What do you like? Oh, it's lovely and short. I set out to persecute anybody who would poetry, and certainly not persecute them about what I meant, because that was the next question. What does it mean? What do I know? But the poem that they had inflicted on them was a poem that goes like this. Would you jump into my grave as quick? My granny would ask when one of us took her chair by the fire. You woman, done up to the nines, red lips a come on, your black eye on my man tonight in a Dublin bar, pink first of the steep drop, the 6 dark feet. You wonder what they're filling the heads of the children. I take no responsibility for what they make of that. But anyway, that notion that to go for something small and my own love of patterns and quilts. And the other big source for this was the memorial quilts made by the communities of the city and the country to remember their kids who were lost in various fuck-ups, in the state and the republic. The poor communities whose children were lost. So every Bridget's Day, and she is the patron saint of poetry, I stand, if I can, in Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Shawmacdown Street, and the communities have their quilts hanging from the walls, and it is the most inspiring memorials I come across. So there you have it. So anyway, on this super moon, which it's 30 miles closer to the Earth than it usually ever is, and won't be this close again until 2034. So I didn't know this, of course, when I set out on the journey, but I knew that there'd be a full moon tonight, and it's Monday, which is Moon's Day, Monday. So I didn't realise it would be quite the moon it is, but it does explain a few things, the lunacy of some of the things that have been happening, but I promise I won't go there. The moons like pebbles adrift on the stream, night moon and day moon, moon in eclipse, slender new moon in the winter sky, and full harvest moon, a golden ball. Moon of my first breath, my mother's death. Grandfather moon, my father's frail boat. Moon of my lost child, my sister's fall. Moon of my beloved's waking dream. Moons of my life adrift on the stream. The clouds. Over the last few years I've had numerous students, especially in the universities, but I've had people coming to workshops out in the different communities. So this is the clouds. Some mornings the room is full of clouds. Clouds where the students' heads ought to be little weather systems of their own. They put all their work up on the cloud, dream and song and secret and story. Consciousness seeds the digital zone with cold fronts, sunny spells, cirrus clouds. Every weather of the room I grieve, the cloud, children of the new machines. The old neighbourhood, there's some people here who go back to friendships that go back to Meehan's class, K4's there, and people who go back to the old neighbourhood. So this is the old neighbourhood. I was dreaming of Gardner Street again, Georgian's inner cityscape, how they named it when they laid it out, somewhat like a natal horoscope, squares that trine on sextile country seats. As if summoned on some psychic Skype, the ghosts of my childhood manifest, my feral girls, my angels, who skipped summer into being with each beat. I don't know if Cecily Brennan is here, is she? Yes. Where is she? I'm sure. There's Cecily. Cecily is great pal, and she has been really spearheading the artist campaign to appeal the Eighth Amendment. And tonight she has actually brought along badges, right? So by any means possible, so the badges are here and they're a way of funding the continuous this campaign to be the Eighth Amendment. She's one of our great artists, and her work really has opened my eyes. One of her sculptures is stainless steel wristbands. Hinged, polished stainless steel wristbands, a bit like the bracelet I'm wearing, though it's on a hinged, polished steel, and engraved with a kind of medical-looking Velcro pink holder. And engraved on one is, I won't do it, and on the other is, not today anyway. So I think that's a fantastic, they're called suicide guards. I just think it's such a powerful image for the times we're living in and what people are going through. So I wrote this. I love that amazing sculptor and for all the work that she does in that campaign. So the promise, I won't do it, not today I won't. do it anyway. Not today, no, not because I can't do it, I won't. Fallow fields lie dreaming under snow, they won't be ploughed, not this spring they won't. On the fence post, a grey hooded crow is part of some mystery I won't fathom now. Though I'm really quite low, I won't do it. Not today, I won't. I'll read this one, the bonnet. Some of my famous pals from my misspent youth showed up tonight. And I'm also celebrating my 60th birthday, which I didn't, thanks very much. I didn't have time to celebrate in 1915 because I was running around under a terrible pressure like a maniac. So anyway, from now on I won't be under the same kind of pressure because my job as Ireland Chair of Poetry finished officially 2 weeks ago. So I only represent myself from now on, right? Anyway, so some of those friends are here tonight, so they might recognise this person here. The bonnet. That's how when we dressed as characters from Persuasion. We gender bended through the finless fields. I wore velvet trousers and cravat. You pranced about in a bonnet nicknamed Jane Austen, golden straw sprigged with silk columbine. By the time we sat summer exams, you were wasted. We read in your eyes the opened grave, the funeral rain. And this is another poem. It's called The Broken Bow. So I had, that old lullaby in mind when the bow breaks. The broken bow. We held our breaths when you were a boy, out on the limb of the old oak tree, helpless below as you shimmied up into its shadowy canopy. That day the bough broke and you clung there, alone through the sudden thunderstorm. We came upon you unafraid, though drenched to the bone. The pattern set. All those times since, we wasted our breath. The flood. There's some parts of the country, probably up in County Leitrim, I might say, I've been living, if I said this home, right? Up there, where they sell land by the bucket. So, anyway, thanks, computer, I couldn't answer me. So the flood. It was only when it receded we knew it for the gift it had been. If truth be told, we missed the water. It was exactly what we'd needed. We missed the way it made a mirror, doubled goose, godwit, egret, heron, and that once in moonlight we looked down at two complete and drowning strangers. Those depths were later wolfbane seeded. I'm just going to read two more, and then, there's might be a drop of wine left. There's some food which was made by Carol, who has the house restaurant at Oakham, food. And we probably ramble upstairs later. No rambling upstairs. Oh no. Yeah, ramble is the cold word. Ramble upstairs later. And remember, everyone's on their best behaviour. Okay. The quilt. I know that my Uncle Walter is here, but I think, is my Aunt Pat here? Yeah. Where is she? I'm delighted to make it. Because this poem actually is set in the bedroom where I often slept with my Aunt Pat, my Aunt Nancy, and my Aunt Joan in Ringo. So this is set in their bedroom. And Mary Heaney very quiet, very happily, and from my point of view, and kindly put this in a fantastic anthology, which you should all get as a Christmas present, right? It's called Lullabies and Night Poems, and it's published by Poetry Ireland. We're in their new premises across the square. We expect great things now that they're on the north side. So this remembers the roundy window in the room in Marino, the quilt. It was a simple affair, 9 squares by 9 squares, blue on green spots, stripes, bows, alternate with gold on red chevrons. My grandmother's quilt I slept under the long and winding nights of childhood. Above the bed a roundy window, my own full moon. I loved the weathers wheeling past, the stars, the summer suns, my auntie's deep breaths, distant thunder. And the last one, because this may well be in memory of my great age. It's called a memory stick, right? A memory stick. Okay. I really realise, that I'm very old technology. A fountain pen and a notebook. The memory stick. I searched high, low, all over the place, growing more anxious by the minute. A whole summer's work in a square-inch cohesion of metal and plastic. An ode, an elegy, a ballad, a sonnet flawed by its rhetoric but still retrievable at a pinch. If I could recall where I put it, my memory stick in a shiny case. So thank you all.
Paula ain't going anywhere. She's not going upstairs at least for a while. So if anybody wants to tap her in the corner, the deal can be done. Thanks again, all of you, for coming out. On my own behalf and my partner's behalf, and Dennis, it's a fantastic occasion, not just to launch this book, but to do a new book of Paula's in Dublin. I won't even say in Ireland. I won't even say in Dublin. I'll say in the north side. Across the park. There's something kind of special about it. So thanks for being here to share the crack. Thank you.